Shalom, good afternoon. Just a short message. I'm just out here in the front porch, or the front yard, with Ruby, so if I get distracted, it would just be for me to recall Ruby from walking away and stuff like that. But I hope everyone is okay, everyone is well. You know, before you guys were born, before your grandparents were born, before your great-grandparents, before there were people, before there were animals, before there were dinosaurs, before there was the land and the sea and anything in creation, before creation itself, before time, there was God, and there was Hashem. And Hashem was one, and Hashem was all that there was. But there's one thing that Hashem, that God, was not capable of, because Hashem was one. And that's, God was not capable of relationship. And for lack of a better term, God was lonely. And God thought and thought and thought and thought, and poof, an idea formed. And this idea was to make creation. And this idea took the form of a light. I don't mean a light like light bulb, or light like the sun or the stars. I mean a light like you wouldn't believe. A sacred, sacred light. And Hashem took this light and put it inside a vessel, kind of like a plant vase, and put it inside and inside, took all the light of this idea. And after Hashem had taken all this light and put it into this vessel, Hashem lifted the vessel way up. And with one fell swoop, boom! Hashem bursted the vessel, and the shreds of light, the sparks of light went through all of creation, into every little corner, and every little bit of creation was this sacred light. So everywhere you go, even now, there's a bit of sacred sparks. Holy sparks in everything. In every plant. In every rock. In every person. In every animal. And even in the spaces in between. I gotta ask you a question. Who do these holy sparks belong to? I mean, we feel them and we see them, but who do they really belong to? That's right, they belong to God, they belong to Hashem. And what do we do when we find something that we know that does not belong to us? We seek out to return that lost thing, item, spark, back to the source from which it came. And that's what we do. As Jews, this is what we do. But you might ask, hey, but Mr. Spinrad, Tal, depending on your age, how do we do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. The way that we do it is by we do mitzvot. With every mitzvah we do, we are returning a holy spark back to the source. Every time you water a plant, you return that holy spark back to the source. Every time You help someone who needs help. Shoom! You bring back that holy spark to the source. Every time you daven, every time you pray, every time you give hugs, every time you give voice to what you know is right. Not only for yourself, but for others. You return a holy spark to its source. And one day, when the whole world does enough mitzvot, all the holy sparks would have been returned to the source, and the source will be whole again. Creation will be whole. Some call it nirvana, some call it heaven, some call it the time of the Mashiach. Whatever you call it, it's wholeness, it's shalom. And that's what we work for. That, in a small part, or no small part, is our purpose. So go out today, tomorrow, the next day, and every day after, and count your days. And with each and every day, see what you can to return those holy sparks. Now, I also want for my families in Q, to do something for me. Because next week we're going to start talking about Bereshit. We're going to start talking about the stories, our first origin stories as a Hebrew people. All the way back. And they're different types of stories. They're kind of a different type of stories than the narrative that comes after Avram and Sarai. And we'll talk about how they're different as well. But to prepare for that, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to find some stories that explain how the world is. A good example is if you can maybe find some Tinga Tinga Tales. You can Google it. If you can find some of those. And then I want you to come up after seeing some of those tales and some of those stories. I want you to come up with maybe 2 or 3 questions that you think that those stories are trying to answer. The Tinga Tinga Tales are stories from Africa, because sometimes we forget that as a Hebrew people that a great majority of our tradition is an African tradition. Yes, it is. Get that jaw back. Stop looking surprised. It is. A lot of it's from the Near East, but a lot of it's African as well. And these are African stories that have why does the snake crawl? Why does the snake slither on the ground? Or why does the camel have humps? And they're fun stories, but I want you to imagine yourself as a child thousands of years ago, and your Abba or Ima have told you this story, and I want you to imagine, what question do you think you asked to prompt that story? Why is the sky blue? Why do things fall to the ground? And even for extra credit, if you want to, you can come up with some questions of your own to ask your parents. And parents make up a story or a story that you heard from your childhood to explain that. And then together as a family, you can illustrate that story. But that's what we're going to do with Bereshit. Because the first part of our Torah is what's called mythic stories, a mythic narrative, a thing that's trying to explain why the world is the way that it is, and try to teach us some values and way to be in the world along the way. So go and have some fun with that. Play with that. And even if you want to find some stories that you don't necessarily agree with what message they're sending out, and we'll talk about it. Till then, I will be seeing some of you guys in a virtual meeting later on. And if not, we will be sending out Hebrew and narrative stuff next week. Take care, and if I don't see you before then, Shabbat Shalom, be well, and keep yourself safe out there, folks. Bye-bye.